All right, we'll go ahead and kick this off. So, welcome to everyone joining us, whether you're on Zoom or on LinkedIn Live. Thank you for being here, however, you're getting this content. So, we are doing our 42Q Partner Connect webinar today with OnTime Edge, and they're going to be joining us. And today, we're going to be talking about smart manufacturing in motion and how you can turn MES into real-time quality and process performance. So let's go ahead and get started here. So we're going to go through and talk about some common issues manufacturers face, how to turn strategy into results, workforce enablement, interconnecting your manufacturing systems, um, cloud MES, how it can meet you where you are, and then we'll have some time for Q&A at the end. So before we get into the actual content here, let's take a look at who you're going to be hearing from today. So myself, I am Bobby Hanna, the training and technical writing manager here at 42Q. So my job is to make sure that our customers understand how things are supposed to work with our product and get the most value out of it. With me from 42Q is Eric Moldenauer. He is our professional services manager. So he brings close to 30 years of experience working in manufacturing environments and over 25 actually implementing MES systems. So he's going to have a lot of experience and bring some real world examples to this webinar to show us how MES can make results. And then from OnTime Edge, we've got the CEO, Brian Vogel. So again, he's got over 30 years of experience in the manufacturing environment. And to say that Brian is a wealth of knowledge in the manufacturing space is definitely an understatement. So I know he's going to bring a lot of value just talking about the manufacturing environment in general and how you can get advantage out of cloud MES. All right, so we're first talking about here how moving from vision to execution. So there's some key issues that are confronting manufacturers that are driving this need to go towards digital transformation and look at things like MES systems. So the first one being data ubiquity. So that is the constant stream of information that is coming in from, all the different systems that are in your environment, the machines, everything like that. It's a lot of different information that's coming in. And along with that comes interoperability. So you need to make sure that all these systems can talk and that you can get the information to each other so that you can take advantage of it. And then there's some workforce challenges that come along with that, and we're going to talk about those. Making sure that you can get these people trained, and then also to make sure that these years and years of experience that you've got in your environment, make sure that you can digitize that and use it for moving forward. So Brian, do you want to kind of talk about, I know you guys just had your manufacturing summit. You want to talk about some of the key issues you're seeing manufacturers are facing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think we're at a really interesting time. And, you look at the cost of edge compute, it's dropped considerably. At the same time, you have a push for monetization of data from machines, from systems differently than you've had previous. And the reason for that is because technologies evolve so quickly. Now, one of the points that you raise around data ubiquity, what exactly does that mean? It means getting the data out of a system or out of a piece of equipment and putting it in a contextually wrapped, ready to use format. So whether you are engineering, whether you are sustainability, reliability, maintenance, or the folks actually doing the shop floor operations, you need to use that data in a very specific way to execute your job. The challenge right in the marketplace is how do you do that at scale, and how do you actually do that across your enterprise? And we're at this point where we're helping organizations understand that through an MES framework, actually it enables you at a much quicker, more standardized approach to tackle the challenges of disparate technologies and uncontextualized, untapped data. Think you might be on mute, Bobby? Yeah, Bobby, you're on mute.
Thank you for that. All right, so next we can kind of talk about, okay, how do you turn this strategy into measurable results? So how do you take these issues and how do you solve them with MES? Because again, we want to make sure that, we're finding a way to take all that data and utilize it in one central location. So you got to kind of have one system as your digital keystone. So we're going to talk about how cloud MES is going to be that digital keystone. So number one, the first thing is easy to configure. So there's no software necessary to install. It's very easy for your personnel to learn how to use this system. There's not a ton of training necessary. It's very quick to integrate. That's one of the things we take pride on is keeping up with technology and making sure that we can integrate with all these systems, all your machinery out there, so you can take advantage of all that data. And you're going to see some fast ROI. So wherever you're at in this digital transformation journey, you're going to be able to utilize a cloud-based MES like 42Q to see some very fast ROI and some very fast results with that. And then it's also highly scalable. So not only scalable if you have multiple plants, but also it allows you to start small with a particular feature set. And then as you go through this digital transformation journey, you can scale up these feature sets within one system. So Eric, do you kind of want to tell us some kind of real world examples of when you've seen some quick ROI happen with customers?
Absolutely, Bobby. Thanks. So, for example, one of our customers, Bedford Industries, they're a global leader in packaging and label solutions such as twist ties, customized tags for the retail industry. They came to 42Q with struggling with a homegrown legacy MES system. And that was becoming unsustainable due to technology and workforce limits. So part of their process is their manufacturing process involves dispensing precise amounts of plastic pellets to achieve the proper product color, for example. And the critical challenges that they were facing were relevant to their legacy system having no machine integration with these pellet dispensers. This meant that they had zero visibility of the manufacturing process and these machines, therefore couldn't actually track material consumption. So the other thing is that due to the fact that the existing legacy system was built on an outdated platform, even small system changes required weeks to implement, which basically hindered their ability to improve their processes. So by implementing 42Q, we established direct machine integration with these dispensing machines, allowing them to track the materials instantly and pinpoint the usage, the consumption of those materials. Additionally, with an ERP integration with NetSuite, we provided a direct channel from 42Q to the ERP to consume those materials in a near real-time production process. So that those updates that previous engineers would have to make to their system that used to take weeks now can be handled by a single administrator in hours. And we've also saved valuable time identifying the exact pellet material consumption during the manufacturing process because it's channeled right from 42Q for the traceability, but then onto the ERP for those decrementation of the materials consumed, right? And this combination of real-time material traceability and system adaptability provides Bedford with significant rapid ROI.
Thanks, Eric. And Brian, you want to add anything, any of the customers that you guys have seen out there that are seeing some very fast ROI from this digital transformation with a cloud MES?
Yeah, absolutely. So, irrespective of how you're, bringing your materials into your shop floor, there's a significant dependency on people. And when you're implementing an MES, you're actually driving and consolidating multiple steps. So in essence, through clicks, scans, and push buttons, you're able to accelerate, the time that it would normally take to complete a task or a series of tasks. And when you put that at scale at every single work cell, across your build life cycle, that compounds to a really significant outcome in terms of time. And time really is, a value driver because you're able to actually ship product much quicker. You're actually now, by digitizing the entire process, you're able to control quality. So instead of producing at risk or producing and waiting for a quality review, you're able to actually assess the quality marks as you're going through the process. This allows you to really drive real-time release and just review by exception. These are really significant contributors to your increasing your quality, but also releasing your product to market significantly faster.
Great. All right, thanks, Brian. Appreciate that. So now moving on to the workforce enablement piece. Like, so again, this is a common thing that's facing manufacturers where you've got workers that have this wealth of knowledge that have been there for 20, 30 years, and then now they're starting to age into retirement. So you've got that coupled with bringing in this new force and workforce and making sure that you can get them spun up quickly so that you can take advantage of them and start using their skills and things like that in your workforce environment. So with things like 42Q, we've got guided workflows that can take this and make it easy to understand what they're actually setting up in the system. The digitized work instructions is crucial. Making sure that they've got the correct information, it's up to date. We can connect with the PLM and just make sure that they're using the most up-to-date work instructions and they've got all that digitally present, that it flips to the correct page, whatever they're working on. And that goes along with the simplified user interface as well. So we have a fully customizable user interface that makes it easy to align it with what your operators need to do so that they can do their job more easy. Because, again, the kind of how I look at it for the two main things of an MES is for the manufacturer to gather data and for the operators to be able to understand what they need to do. So we don't want the operators to have to think about our system. We just want them to be able to look at that screen and intuitively know what they need to do within that. So Eric, along with that use case that you talked about earlier, you want to talk about some of the workforce challenges they were facing around that using that legacy system?
Absolutely. So again, I'll use that example of Bedford Industries. They were facing the talent cliff, which is basically the reality where these engineers or software developers who built and maintain this legacy MES, they're approaching their retirement age, right? And because that legacy system was built on this outdated proprietary software, it was difficult for the customer to find engineers with that specific skill set, right? Which created a major sustainability risk. How do you keep this system maintained, right? So by migrating to 42Q, Bedford effectively solved this gap, this workforce gap, by eliminating the need to look for specialized software engineers that could maintain this legacy platform. And then the shift to 42Q, this modern platform, ensures that the system is sustainable for the long term, and it drastically reduces the operator complexity, therefore providing a more modern sustainability. And most importantly, it allows the existing manufacturing team to stop thinking about the maintenance or the new features or the things that they were managing in their legacy MES, and they're able to focus their energies on actual production optimization.
Thanks, Eric. Brian, you got anything to add to that? Do you want to talk about the workforce enablement that you've seen out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the, everything that Eric said is absolutely true. You look at the manual, processes, and you look at the history that someone brings, and you mentioned IP, Bobby. The crux of that is that when you start off on an MES project, the first thing you're doing is walking the shop floor. You're tracking all of those processes. Then you're actually developing, whether you call them a workflow, a recipe, a production, framework, whatever the nomenclature might be, you're taking those best practices, and that's what you're actually digitizing within the MES. So you're in effect capturing that best practice. And then, when you're interacting with SOPs, whether it be through a PLM or learning management, you're able to continually to evolve them at a much quicker, faster rate. But it also is, capturing all of the intellectual know-how that's currently in your environment, so that as you start to evolve and new folks coming in, they're inheriting that history because you're using 42Q as the framework to extend.
Great. Thanks, Brian.
You're welcome.
All right. And so, Brian, I'm gonna give you a good bit of time on this one because I think this is kind of important for people to understand. So we're talking about building the foundation for the future, with something like a cloud-based MES. So you're looking to solve a few things here. So the first is the digital agility of not only making sure that you can keep up with the current technologies that's out there, but also like any future technology, because we want to make sure, and that's an advantage of using something like 42Q, is that we're keeping up with the AI, ML, all the new technologies that are coming out there so that you can take advantage of that within your MES system. Also the data governance, making sure, especially if you're in a regulated environment, making sure that you stay up with those regulations that make sure that the data is secure and it's handled properly. And then also the interoperable architecture. So you want to make sure that you can connect with these external systems and make sure you can take advantage of all that information and actually utilize it built together. So when we're talking about this, kind of the best places to start, where do you think is a good place for people to look on this digital transformation journey to actually kind of start with?
So within 42Q, you have the ability for data ingestion, and it's a services bus. From an architectural perspective, it allows you to connect to all the adjacent systems, whether it be upstream to ERP or downstream to your control. That is an actual really, really important component because it allows you to make the data available, whether it's in relation to a specific work order or process, or you're actually pushing that in some type of publish subscribe your relationship with a shareholder or stakeholder, in a different persona. So, and by persona, I mean another job site. So if you have maintenance wanting to look at the same data, or as we said earlier, engineering, reliability, sustainability, 42Q services bus architecture, it allows it to push and pull that data and drive the workflows correspondingly. So when you look at your digital transformation, it's very easy to look at a problem and look at a technology, say, hey, fix. But the challenge is that it's really hard to scale. So when you look at this, you should always look at it from the data life cycle up. And what data am I generating? Where is it coming from? What protocol, what form, what time dependencies, and where do I need to move it? And when you look at it from that context, you now understand truly the value that 42Q, brings in terms of its data orchestration capabilities and mapping.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Brian. And that kind of takes us to our last slide here. So we're talking about the advantage of a cloud MES and being able to meet you wherever you are in that digital transformation journey. So whether you're just starting out, usually when manufacturers are coming from something like a paper-based system, things like that, they're looking at things like they want to make sure that you get the product traceability, the route enforcement, make sure that product follows the correct route and skips can't be stepped. Digitizing those work instructions, as we talked about earlier, instead of having to have this huge paper traveler that goes around with all the work instructions there, you digitize that information along with best practices, and you make sure, again, that the operator doesn't have to flip through a 100-page manual to find what they need to do. When they come to that step, it's already at the correct work instruction. So there's a lot of advantages around the speed and also the accuracy, making sure they've got the most up-to-date information that's there present with them. The work order management, you're looking at doing some basic work order creation management to make sure that things are grouped together correctly, and then some basic reporting at the beginning. You just kind of want to know, all right, what's going on? Where can I make improvements? Then as you start to move along, we look at things like the ERP integration, as Eric was talking about with NetSuite and our other ERPs that are out there, of being able to get that BOM information and start looking at consuming materials. We started looking at things like machine maintenance with CMMS. Machine integration, so things like getting the up-down status, error codes, test machine data, being able to ingest all this data that's coming from your machines, and then we can utilize a lot of that to help you view your OEE and your TEP information, because that's where manufacturers can make a lot of difference, is really understanding how effective they're being and making adjustments based on that. And then some operations dashboards, some things you can put up on the production floor in the operations office, whatever it is, to see that important information that's going on in your operations currently on a day-to-day basis. And then we move on from there and start getting a little bit more down the digital transformation journey. And we look at things like a BI tool, like enterprise dashboards, being able to crunch that data together and analyze it in some more advanced dashboards. We look at things like statistical process control. So being able to really, really analyze your quality data and make improvements in your processes based off of that. Also, we look at going from machine integration to machine automation. So not only getting the information from your machines, but also controlling things within your manufacturing environment. So if when a unit's finished, you want it to trigger a conveyor belt and then an ROV to come over and pick it up, whatever it is, we can program things like that through 42Q with this machine automation. You look at things like integrating with your PLM, again, for your work instructions, other engineering information, and then your warehouse management system down the road to know when things are shipped and stuff like that. So Brian, do you want to kind of add a little bit here as far as this crawl, walk, run kind of mentality and thinking about wherever they are in this digital transformation journey?
No, absolutely. So, whether you're thinking a rapid, deployment where you're going in to solve a very specific problem, maybe it's a compliance, maybe it's meeting a contractual component for your customer, um, or you're taking the time to actually figure out how do you stack value so you continue to move and pivot to the things that are actually streamlining your business. So the beautiful thing about 42Q is whether you want to start in packaging or upfront in weigh and dispense or kitting, you have the ability to pick and choose based on the underlying business driver. And the framework is such that once you establish the integrations to whether it be ERP to get the work order or into the shop floor, you have the ability to continue to add pivot to the value, and there's a lot of the crawl walk run. You have a change management implication that you want to temper. You want to make sure that you're getting the value out of. You want to make sure that as you grow and your dependency on MES starts to increase, you want to have a framework that's capable of helping you, in that and accelerating that and de-risking it, and enable you to have a much more extensible framework. That is the underpinnings of how 42Q was designed. So you can move some plants all in, some plants or lines or work cells at a time. So, having that, this is a truly collaborative tool, and it's also a stackable tool set. And there's nothing else in the marketplace that actually can meet you where you're at in the same fashion.
Thanks, Brian. Well said. All right, so we've got a couple questions here, but before we move on to the questions, I want to give Brian a little opportunity to talk about, so that they partner with us from the MES perspective, but of course, OnTime Edge handles a lot of stuff outside of that, as far as just enterprise software, machines, just manufacturing in general. So Brian, I'll give you a little bit of time here if you want to talk about what you guys kind of do and offer at OnTime Edge.
Absolutely. Thank you, Bobby, for the opportunity. So OnTime Edge is the world's leader in planning and scheduling. We've done over 1,000 implementations and driven commercially somewhere about $150 million in professional services across that 1,000 installations. So we're by far the leader in that space. And as those companies start to really try to understand fundamentally how do you extend the value of both planning and scheduling, the integration to MES is absolutely essential. And quite frankly, before you would even look for a planning and scheduling software, you should actually be thinking about an MES, because as we said a few slides ago, it serves as your foundational component to digital transformation. So as we've evolved, we now are driving global digital strategies for our customers. And absent of any technology, it's really about the life cycle of data. When do you need it? What format do you need it in? And what is the time dependency? And by deriving that, we're helping foster a closer relationship between IT and OT, and setting up the framework for true digital transformation. So as we've evolved, it's really become apparent that it's going to be hard in the marketplace to see compounded adjacent value if you don't have a digital first strategy. And that's what we're building, our entire business model around.
Great. All right, thanks, Brian. All right, so we have a couple questions posted on LinkedIn here. So I'm going to kind of ask this. Eric, I'll pose this first one to you. So typically for an MES implementation for cloud MES, what's the kind of typical timeline look like for that, for a plant that's implementing this?
Sure. So typically with the 42Q accelerators, you can begin that that digital factory journey in as little as 4 to 6 weeks. And these accelerators can be rapidly deployed and evaluated with low risk at a fixed price. And this allows the manufacturers to start small and scale up to meet their business and operational needs on demand.
Great. And the kind of the second part of this I'll pose to you, Brian, and that is kind of when they're looking at where to start, where's kind of the best place to look at, which lines, which cells to work with, things like that. Where's the best place to look for them to start?
So, I think sometimes it's easy to say I have to solve it, but there's a found cause. So as part of our workshops, we come in and we actually assess the entire life cycle. Then we prioritize based on the value, based on the risk, based on compliance factors. And we're able to then help our customers understand what is the right order that they should be tackling this, and prioritize that again based on value, based on regulatory compliance, and time to value from an outcomes perspective.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Brian. Another question here, Eric, and I guess it's going to kind of depend, but how does MES integrate with legacy systems? So, if we're thinking about legacy machines, things like that, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. So there's a few different ways. We support, for example, middlewares like Kepware, Node-RED, or we can even use an edge device for secure communications from the ground to the cloud. And most of these things are going to be API based, RESTful APIs. So it's kind of a when your machine has some information, sensor data like time series sensor, environmental data type things, those are either sent again through Kepware, Node-RED, or through that edge device, that's secure connectivity through API.
Cool. Thanks, Eric. And then our last question here, and this will take us up to the end. So, Brian, I'll pose this one to you. Is the starting point different for one person's industry versus another? For instance, if we're talking about medical or automotive or something like that, or are they all kind of generally the same?
So I think, at a process level, there's always going to be nuances, and there's always going to be outliers because of, again, regulatory, particularly in the life sciences. But, the reality of it is that you usually have an ERP system that's driving your routes, your mass and material, your equipment, and they're pushing that to the shop floor, whether it be paper-based or, leveraging some type of, ETL feed. And then ultimately you drive through that process. Now, yes, some might bake, boil, steam, some might be using pneumatic presses, but fundamentally that process is going to continue to go through. Then you go through some type of finish, whether that's, you're sterilizing and then wrapping, or you're doing a fill finish. And again, while it's nuanced, the reality of it is that the processes are largely consistent from a data flow perspective and the people interaction. So you can't take the position that there's no differences, because clearly there are. But in a nutshell, the framework is fairly consistent, whether it's baby foods, bombs, or tools. That process flow is going to be representative.
All right, great. Thanks, Brian. All right, that brings us to the end of our webinar. I want to thank everyone for joining us on LinkedIn and here on Zoom as well. I also want to thank our presenters. So thank Eric from 42Q. Thanks for bringing your perspective from the implementer side here at 42Q. And also thank you again for Brian for again bringing that wealth of knowledge that you have, and kind of giving everybody some information about kind of how to think about doing this and beginning this digital transformation journey. So appreciate you guys both for joining. Again, the contact information for each of the presenters is here on the screen. So feel free to reach out. For the MES perspective, we'd be glad to talk to you guys. And then Brian, for anything out there for the planning, any of the other manufacturing space, reach out to OnTime Edge. So thank you guys again. Have a great day.
Thank you, Bobby.
All right,
Thank you.